There are about 400 million people living in coastal cities around Asia, and those cities, including cities like this one, Hong Kong, are vulnerable to sea level rise, storms, and the occasional rare tsunami. So we have to address how we engineer these cities to meet the challenges that are posed by these threats. Our cities continue to expand, and this image of a night image of Southeast Asia shows the concentration that we have of people and populations at the coastline. And those populations are at very clear risk of sea level rise. And as those populations grow, and this image contains more than half the world's population, they grow very quickly. So over the last 2 decades, we've seen incredible growth of coastal populations in Southeast Asia. This is an image of the Pearl River Delta in southern China, established cities like Hong Kong and Macau, but new cities like Zhuhai and Shenzhen, growing very rapidly over the last 2 decades, are clearly vulnerable to storms and sea level. Compounding this problem, we have sinking cities. Bangkok is sinking, and Jakarta, in that image on the right, are sinking at around 10 to 15 centimeters per year in places. This dwarfs global sea level change. Sea level change at a global sense adds on top of these sinking cities. So places like Jakarta are already facing significant problems with coastal flooding. Jakarta will be relocated. This is an image of northern Jakarta. It floods during the highest tides, and the Indonesian government have already made moves to relocate much of the infrastructure in this part of the world. On top of this, we have global sea level rise. Sea levels are rising as our oceans heat up and as our ice sheets melt. The image on the left-hand side shows a piece of the Larsen ice sheet in Antarctica breaking off. A similar piece broke off today. This is 1 trillion tons of ice that moved out and melted and added to contributions to sea level rise. In Southeast Asia, the problem is even worse. The image at the top looks at the heat example and other physical relationships, but at the bottom, it shows that as the ice melts in the Arctic and in Greenland and in Western Antarctica, all of that sea level melt will move to Southeast Asia. We will get both aspects of that. On top of this, the baseline of sea level also contributes to the risk of storms and tsunamis. In that historical image in the bottom left-hand side, this is 1933 Shanghai. We have a very clear risk of storms and tsunamis compounded on top of sea level rise that is facing many cities in Southeast Asia. Cities like Singapore, for example, here shown on the left-hand side. This is east coast of Singapore with nuisance flooding. This nuisance flooding will continue, and we really only have 2 options. We can adapt or we can retreat. And in Southeast Asia, we will no doubt have to do both. And as we move forward, there is going to be a losing battle for many. This is the coastline of California, which is eroding very rapidly with rising sea level and increasing storminess. How we address this requires really innovative engineering and innovative solutions. We have to move forward on this, and we have to move now, because for many, it's already too late. Some cities are being fairly proactive. This is an image of a plan for New York that shows they're going to change and increase their flood defenses in the wake of furious cyclones in the past and address the hurricane issues that face this part of the world. How we do this involves innovation. It involves us having changes to the paradigm of engineering that we have in the coast. Making cities that are adaptable and reduce the vulnerability to nuisance flooding and sea level rise is fundamental to first-class cities in a global context. How do we do this? We have many solutions, but we have to act quickly. The longer we wait, the more it's going to cost. The opportunity cost is already there. This is an image from the southern US. It shows nuisance flooding from storms, and it shows that we have to start looking at our infrastructure. We have to change the way we engineer our coasts, and it requires true innovation. There are options out there. Floating facilities, integrating land packages at the coast to make them both usable for the community and adaptable to vulnerability to sea level rise, storms, and tsunamis, allow us to produce coastlines that are sustainable. So the options are there, we need to adopt them. Beautiful cities like this city that we're in today, Dalian, are vulnerable to sea level rise. They will be vulnerable to storms and tsunamis in places. How we move forward and seize this opportunity for sustainable coasts is fundamental to the future of this planet. Thank you.